Hello, and welcome to a special live edition of GWE Stupendous Saturday. So I was just going to do a video on the Vice TV documentary Who Killed WCW, which part one of it was live, which aired this week in America and available on YouTube for everyone else. But I thought I may as well try and do a live show just in case someone did decide to join and watch. So I'm going to give it a minute or so. Before we get into the WCW documentary, SmackDown, watch SmackDown this week. Interesting show, or decent show. Passing the time till Clash at the Castle. 2 more matches announced, and now I think it's a very solid 5-match card for Clash at the Castle. So Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles in an I Quit match, which will be good. I think, if it's 70% as good as their first match, then it's a good match. The I Quit stipulation, and then a triple threat for the women's tag team titles has also been added. So it's now 5 matches, adding to Bayley and Piper Niven. The main event, Damian Priest against Drew McIntyre. I'm 99% convinced that will be the main event, being in Scotland. And we had 1 viewer there, plus we had 1 cat as well at the same time. So so looking forward to Clash at the Castle, and we will be doing plenty of live videos and a vlog for Clash at the Castle, as myself and my daughter Talia will be attending Clash at the Castle next week. This time next week we'll be a few hours away from Clash at the Castle. So right, so the WCW documentary, Who Killed WCW? So it's by Vice TV, who do the Dark Side of the Ring. So if anyone's seen any of those documentaries, they're quite, they're not WWE friendly documentaries, and they won't be produced by WWE. But interestingly, this is produced by The Rock and by Danny Garcia. So The Rock's ex-wife and also business partner produced it, and The Rock's contributes to this as well, which is interesting. And it has various other guests. So Eric Bischoff, probably main contributor, Conan from WCW, Bret Hart, Booker T, Diamond Dallas Page, amongst others. So it's a really good documentary, and what I would do is recommend you check it out. Not in the middle of this video if you're watching, though. Check it out after. But it's worth a watch, and it's a trip down memory lane for myself, who was a probably 15-year-old when the whole Monday Night Wars, something like that, 15-year-old when the Monday Night Wars happened. It was interesting in the UK because we didn't get Raw live. We actually got Raw and Nitro on Friday nights. So for those of you who used to watch will remember that we used to get Raw on Friday nights in the UK, but they also used to show WCW on Friday nights on channel TNT channel, while Raw was on Sky Sports. So I thought it was a really interesting documentary. Really, I think pretty balanced, to be fair. Everyone has their own view, and clearly, in answer to the question, the first episode was Where the Big Boys Play, which always made me laugh when that was a tagline of WCW Nitro. But it was, I thought, a really balanced discussion. And there's clearly different views, and it's only episode 1 of 4, but different views of who actually killed WCW. Everyone has their own views, and Bret Hart has the funniest views if you haven't seen it. So there's a bit of an intro to, I can see I've got an actual viewer. So if you are there, please feel free to contribute to the discussion and enter into the chat if you so wish. So Eric Bischoff, it starts with a little profile of Eric Bischoff, how he started as a sales executive for WCW, pitched himself as the sort of executive producer, and it took off from there. And Eric Bischoff in the wrestling fan community divides opinion because he's very opinionated now. He's an interesting one because obviously he did have, as the documentary says, great success, the 83-week streak where WCW Monday Nitro beat Monday Night Raw for 83 weeks in a row, which is unheard of now. You see with AEW now probably on par with NXT sort of viewership, maybe just above NXT viewership. So yeah, Eric Bischoff does divide opinion, but I think you can't argue that he did some big deal stuff, and especially the way the documentary portrayed it, I thought was quite interesting in that how he changed WCW. WCW was always a distant number 2 to WWE as it was at the time. And I always really found it interesting because in the UK, you didn't see any WCW before Nitro. There was nothing. There might have been, but God knows what channel it was on, and you didn't see anything. So if you said wrestling, people didn't even call it wrestling. People would just call it WWF. And so Eric did make it a viable number 2, and for a while it was a number 1. So it was a really good insight into Eric Bischoff, how he apparently Ted Turner told him, how do we make this number 1? How do we make money and that, because it was always losing money. And his first big thing was to get Hulk Hogan, which if you've seen my videos before, you'll know my views on Hulk Hogan, but obviously a huge star, although a star maybe on the wane in WWF, or maybe people had enough because he had gone, retired, come back. That horrible WrestleMania in 1993, WrestleMania 9, where he comes and takes Bret Hart, loses to Yokozuna, and then he comes in and wins the belt. And then he loses it, and then we don't see him in WWF for many years, because then he does go to WCW in that sort of, I think, 93, 94 time. And that was a big coup, for I remember it. And that's probably the first time I was aware of WCW. I think the only thing I probably knew about WCW was Ric Flair, because Ric Flair had come to WWF. It was my favorite for a period of time when he was in WWF, won that amazing Royal Rumble, became WWF champion, had some great matches. But that was my knowledge of that. Maybe Dusty Rhodes a bit, and knowing that. But, from the odd wrestling magazine or what was the internet when I was 15, which was barely anything. I think at school we could go on it and you could just type in wrestling and you'd get these spoilers for the recorded Raw or Nitro or something like that. That was it. So it was limited knowledge. But WCW, Eric Bischoff did. He got Hulk Hogan in and he got Randy Savage in. And that definitely must have brought some new eyes on it. But it really didn't get close to WWF until so the whole Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, so Razor Ramon, Diesel come across, and this is the real beginning of the blur of reality versus storyline, which we still have in 2024. Although everyone's very smart now, wrestling fans are very smart. They know everything because everything's on the internet, or they think they know everything, and I count myself in that. Sometimes we're second guessing, and it can't be this, it can't be that. But there was a real good era, probably from 96, 97 onwards to, I don't know, till probably before real social media. So when it was just the internet, where when someone appeared on someone else's show, it was, oh my God, a big deal. So definitely a big deal. So Kevin Nash, Diesel, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, big stars in WWF, appeared. I think it was Scott Hall first appeared, and then Kevin Nash appeared, didn't use their real names. WCW purposely, and Eric Bischoff says purposely, made it blur the lines of, are they still working for WWF? Massive big deal. It got my attention. I think that's when I think you could start watching Nitro or in the UK, and I would have never even thought about it before. So started, flicking over, watching clips, and interestingly, they did actually show them at the same time. So even though it was Friday and it was 4 days after it actually aired, they pretty much showed them. From my memory, it was around, I don't know, 8, 9 o'clock on a Friday evening. Both those shows were on. And for those of you who had cable in the UK, you couldn't record one and watch the other, or you couldn't even record one probably. So it was not like you could do now and watch one and then watch one afterwards. So you were flicking in between, which I guess gave us as close to the sort of Monday night wars experience that you got. So Kevin Nash, Scott Hall come in, and then probably the best thing WCW's ever done, which is the Hulk Hogan heel turn. One of the best heel turns. Whatever I think about Hulk Hogan, you have to say that's one of the short. I mean, Hulk Hogan for pre NWO. If you were watching Hulk Hogan during the early or late 80s, early 90s, all American hero, which we know he really wasn't, but he portrayed as that, and winning WWF Championship after WWF Championship, 4-year reign, all of that sort of stuff. For him to turn heel was massive. And I remember being at school, and it was obviously a Sunday night pay-per-view or something like that. And I remember seeing Hogan, or someone telling me, or something, was a picture of Hogan doing a leg drop. And I think that was a big moment. Obviously, it formed the NWO, and they really did tap into that whole sort of thing. There's a really good bit in the documentary. If you don't get to watch it all, there's a really good bit in the documentary how they tried to make it look more realistic and less cartoony stories. And there was a really good Nitro where the NWO invade. They beat up a load of WCW wrestlers. Rey Mysterio, I'm sure some of you may have seen the clip already, even if you haven't seen the documentary of Rey Mysterio just getting thrown against one of the buses by Kevin Nash. And that really set the tone. And at this time, WWF was still going with their traditional baby faces, traditional heels, and very clean-cut storylines. This was before DX, before Bret Hart's heel turn, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that's where I think it goes late into the documentary, where WWE, WWF, WWE, whatever, caught up with WCW by adding some more reality and maturing, I guess, for a more mature audience and getting that. So, so NWO, big catalyst for WCW, 83 weeks. So it's over a year and a half, isn't it, in terms of how long WCW were on top. And again, even now, as well as AEW is doing and as popular it is and the wrestlers they've got and all of that, they're not close to the viewing figures of WWE or of the main shows of WWE, and and whether that's streaming, whether that's the shows on Wednesdays and that, they're quite far away from SmackDown and Raw. So yeah, for those of you who are younger, that was quite an era then in terms of that. The sort of end of the documentary goes into the sort of the beginning of the downfall, and they point a lot to Starrcade '97. So I don't ever remember watching Starrcade '97, but I remember knowing it was a big deal. Hulk Hogan against Sting. And I don't think we could get WCW pay-per-views in the UK at that time, and you couldn't even illegally download it in those days. Or you probably could, but I didn't know how to. But so it was a big deal. But I think I have watched that match, but watching it through and sort of, many people point to the bad ending, and it was discussed amongst things, and Bret Hart in particular was not very complimentary about the ending. Supposed to be a fast count, and Hogan was supposed to retain, and then it's all into Hogan's creative control and way too much power, and it really does feel like the documentary is leaning. There's two directions leaning into. One is the reason why WCW was killed off, or why it finished, and why it ended up getting bought by Vince, was just the sheer power of the wrestlers, particularly Hulk Hogan, who had it written into his contract that he had creative control. So it looks like in this match, he was like, no, I'm going to keep the title, even though the right thing to do would have been that. And whatever happened, the fast count didn't happen. It was a normal count. So Hulk Hogan won cleanly against Sting, which is ridiculous when you think about the build-up of the storyline. And then after that, you've got, then Bret Hart comes out, who had newly joined, or just fresh off the Montreal. I mean, talking about screwing stuff up, I nearly swore there, but it's probably worth a swear with how much they screwed up the whole Bret Hart, screwed, the irony of using the word screwed with Bret Hart, or the whole Bret Hart thing, it will never fail to amaze me. I think that, I remember the beginning of the end of WCW, but it was a really good example of how crap WCW were at a lot of things, and maybe they just got lucky with the NWO, or maybe it was just one good thing, but they put every egg in that basket. And Bret Hart came, of course, the famous Montreal Screwjob, Survivor Series '97, joined WCW a week later or the day later. I can't remember. It was really, really quick, wasn't it? And he does the whole thing in Montreal with WCW writing it up and the thing. And that's Bret Hart, Mr. WWE, Mr. WWF company man. And that really, how they use Bret Hart. So Bret Hart comes out at the end of after the match is finished, says he's going to be the ref. They're going to go again. Sting puts the sharpshooter, which is his Scorpion Deathlock, onto Hogan, and Hogan gives up. I don't think they were trying to make it like the Montreal Screwjob. They only showed a quick clip, but I can't remember it being that. So Hogan did give up, and Sting won. But it was interesting because they were showing internet messaging boards and wrestling messaging boards from 1997, end of '97, and how people had already started moaning. The hypercritical internet wrestling community had already started criticizing the ending of that match, and it looks overbooked even just from the clips, and it might be something I'll check out again, but wasted opportunity. And then they talk about, like, that's the sort of thing, and the sort of conclusion of the first episode, and there's 3 episodes to go. Conclusion of the first episode was Eric Bischoff blames some higher power, and this is where I think Bischoff gets on people's nerves, almost like, the Turner exec, Ted Turner, the owner of WCW, didn't want it to, not him, but people around him didn't want it to succeed. So they kept stopping them and all that. I mean, you look at it, and I remember in real time, the product was dog shit, quite frankly. It got from something really good, and March was, oh my God, who's going to turn up this week? Who's going to turn up that week? remember the Ravishing Rick Rude one. He's on Raw and Nitro on the same week because Raw was recorded, Nitro was live, and you had a load of appearances. I remember Mr. Perfect, loads of WWF wrestlers appearing, but then it just got too much. And then there was a point where they all joined the NWO, and it was NWO black and white, NWO red and this. And I can remember, and I don't know whether that's into 98, 99, that sort of time, but you can see that is definitely one of the reasons it fell, because it wasn't a very good show. And conversely, WWF at the time had caught up. Sort of the birth of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the reality-based thing, Austin McMahon, obviously The Rock, DX was soon after that, and it really, they took the lessons. That's one thing, and obviously Vince McMahon is a despicable human being, but one thing that has always have to give him credit for is he has learned, and then people say sometimes slowly, and look at how Triple H is doing now, and that's a fair point, but over the course of a long period from the 80s to when he was now officially been retired, sort of 40 plus years, he has evolved. He has evolved the product to make it the number one wrestling product, and to retain the number one wrestling, and in this case regain the number one wrestling product. So they evolved, they got better with the storylines. They definitely borrowed. I mean, DX obviously borrowed from NWO, and you look at so many of the bits, the reality based, the blurred lines. I even remember the sort of backstage element and all of that, and it was very much less clear cut baby faces, a lot of blur between the two. I mean, Austin, by Stone Cold Steve Austin, by all intents and purposes, is a bad guy, isn't he? He's that, but he was obviously became the number one wrestler for many a year, popularity wise. So it kind of ends. It ends with the whole who was to blame. Eric Bischoff goes towards the, I don't know, some Illuminati or something. Some people in Ted Turner's organization, but not Ted Turner because it was his organization, who didn't want it to fail. So they started putting censorships and all that. I'm telling you now from experiencing it live at the time, that wasn't the reason why it failed, the censorship or anything like that. They had plenty of time where there was no censorship and they could do what they wanted, and it was crap. So there was that. Bret Hart is very blunt and hilarious. And I mean, he hasn't even spoken about Goldberg yet. So that's going to be, I'm sure, if that doesn't come up in the next 3 episodes, I'll be stunned. So Bret Hart says Bischoff was a puppet, Hogan was puppet master. That's why it failed. I mean, there's definitely some truth in Hogan having power. And I think the rest of the wrestlers, or the rest of the bookers, wrestlers, and the people in the documentary pretty much talk about too much power for the wrestlers, inmates running the asylum. And that would be my take on it. I'm interested to see the next 3 episodes, but that would be my take on the whole WCW, what happened. And there is that the wrestlers had too much power, and it wasn't just Hogan. From the outside, it looked like it was Nash, Hall, other wrestlers, way too much power. I mean, they haven't even got into like the finger poke of doom and stuff like that, which is god awful. And quite frankly, then WWF literally ate them up and bought them and took the wrestlers they wanted, etc. From that, but it's interesting because I think Hogan does have to take a huge part of the blame, because you look at also this discussion I was having on WhatsApp earlier. You look at Hogan in TNA as well, and stuff he did. From just coming in, taking away the 6-sided ring, which made TNA unique, to just over having too much power. And obviously, there's that famous video meme of Hogan's entrance when anyone thinks in the internet community, anyone on Twitter or anything thinks someone's had too much power. It was recently with Becky Lynch. She played that Hogan video with his TNA entrance, which always makes me laugh still now. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing the next 3 episodes. I think it's a well-produced documentary. I would highly recommend it. It's a well thought out documentary as well. It's got varying points of view. It's really interesting that Hulk Hogan is not on it. Well, maybe it's not because he gets blamed for a lot, but then Bischoff gets blamed for a lot and he's on it. I saw Ric Flair's not on it either. And I remember him doing a post when this was first announced why he wasn't on it and moaning about it. But I don't know, maybe there's reasons why Flair's not on it as well. But it's interesting that Hogan's not on it. But because I've always wanted The Rock to say something about Hogan and all his various stuff, but he hasn't. And maybe this is his way of saying to Hulk Hogan, screw you, you're not involved in this. Or maybe Hogan saw the first cut, maybe Hogan realized the way the documentary was going and he couldn't think. But he is the biggest liar in the history of professional wrestling. So I'm sure he would have made up his own bit, but it could have also been hilarious. If you are ever struck and bored or in a need for some entertainment, Google Hulk Hogan's best lies. I would highly recommend that. It's hugely entertaining. And the best one is, maybe not the best one, one of the funniest ones is when he talks about wrestling 400 days in a year because of the time difference between Japan and America. That's an actual thing. Right, I am going to leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed this whenever people do watch it, if anyone does watch it. And I will be, well, me and Talia will be live at some point next week from Glasgow, at Clash of the Castle. So I'll speak to you all then.